The Korean restaurant smelled of sesame oil and grilled meat, a Wednesday evening sanctuary for those seeking comfort in authenticity. Helen Wallace sat at a corner table, draped in oversized scrubs from her shift and an old university hoodie that had seen better days. No makeup, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. After her ex-partner's financial recklessness nearly destroyed her social work license and her faith in love, draining her emotionally and professionally, Helen had developed a foolproof strategy for blind dates: dress down completely. If a man couldn't see past appearances to the person underneath, he wasn't worth her time. Mostly, she just hoped to get through the evening without another shallow conversation about her potential. When the entrance door slid open with a soft chime, Helen glanced up expecting the usual, some well-meaning but forgettable guy her colleague had enthusiastically set her up with. Instead, a man in an immaculately tailored black suit entered, moving with a stillness that suggested absolute control, not just confidence. His dark eyes swept the restaurant with practiced precision until they found her. He smiled, not the eager grin of someone trying too hard, but something quieter, more genuine. Then he walked straight toward her table. "Helen Wallace," he said, his voice low and measured, carrying the faint trace of an accent. "I'm Tae-yong. Your friend said you'd be at the corner table." Helen felt herself tense. This man looked like he'd stepped out of noir film, impossibly composed and elegant, while she sat there looking like she just rolled out of a 12-hour shift, which she had. Yet he settled into the seat across from her, as if her appearance was exactly what he'd hoped to find. "You're not trying to impress me," Tae-yong observed, his eyes holding hers with unexpected intensity. "That's a good sign." Helen blinked, caught off guard. In her experience, men either politely masked their disappointment or made excuses to leave early. But Tae-yong leaned back slightly relaxed, as if her oversized hoodie and exhausted face were refreshing rather than off-putting. "Most people wear masks," he continued, gesturing subtly to his own impeccable appearance. "They show you what they think you want to see. You—" He paused, considering his words carefully. "You're showing me something real." There was something in his tone, something that hinted at a man tired of performances, of calculated impressions. Helen found herself studying him more closely. The sharp lines of the suit, the expensive watch that caught the light, the way the restaurant staff seemed to move around him with unusual deference. "That's a generous interpretation of, 'I just got off work and didn't have time to change,'" Helen said dryly, testing whether his interest was genuine or just another form of pretense. Tae-yong's smile deepened, reaching his eyes. "Even better. You have priorities beyond appearances. That's rare." As a waiter approached their table with unusual speed and formality, bowing slightly to Tae-yong before presenting menus, Helen felt the first whisper of something she couldn't quite name. This wasn't just wealth or status. There was something else beneath the surface, something that made even a confident restaurant staff treat him with careful respect bordering on caution. "So," Helen said, deciding to match his directness with her own, "what brings a man who clearly doesn't need blind dates to set up like this?" Tae-yong's expression shifted, just for a moment, revealing something harder beneath the charm. "Maybe I'm tired of people who only see what I can give them," he said quietly. "Maybe I want to meet someone who doesn't know what I am." The words hung in the air between them, and Helen felt her social worker instincts activate. There was a story there, layers of meaning she couldn't yet decode. But instead of pressing, she simply nodded. "Fair enough," she said. "Then let's start with who you are, not what you are." Something flickered in Tae-yong's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He lifted his cup in a small gesture of acknowledgement. "To authenticity," he said. "To authenticity," Helen echoed, unaware that she had just crossed an invisible threshold from her safe, ethical world into something far more dangerous, and that the man sitting across from her, captivated by her lack of pretense, commanded an empire built on shadows and violence. The evening had begun. Before we go any deeper, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because the moment you join this family, stories like this find you for a reason. The conversation flowed with an ease that unsettled Helen. She'd expected awkward small talk, the usual dance of first date questions. "Where did you grow up? What do you do for fun? Do you like dogs or cats?" Instead, Tae-yong asked her things that mattered. What made her choose social work? What kept her going when the system failed the people she tried to help? What she believed about second chances? Most people don't want real answers to questions like that, Helen said, studying him over the rim of her teacup. They want the sanitized version, the one that makes them feel good about caring. I don't do sanitized, Taeyong replied, and there was an edge to his voice that made her believe him. I've spent too much of my life surrounded by people who perform, who calculate every word, every gesture. It's exhausting. Helen leaned back, surprised by the bitterness in his tone. That sounds lonely. It is. He met her eyes directly, unflinching. When people look at me, they see opportunity, connections, what I can do for them. They don't see, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. They don't see past what I represent. The vulnerability in his admission felt genuine, and Helen found herself responding in kind. My ex-fiancé saw me as a safety net, she said quietly. I had the stable job, the good credit, the ethical reputation. He saw someone he could use. The memory still stung, sharp and acidic. He took out loans in my name, forged my signature on documents, nearly destroyed everything I'd built. My license, my credibility, almost gone because I trusted the wrong person. Taeyong's expression darkened, something cold and dangerous flickering beneath the surface. What happened to him? Legal consequences. Barely. Helen's jaw tightened. But I learned something. People will take whatever you let them take. So now I protect what matters, my integrity, my work, my ability to help people who actually need it. Your integrity, Taeyong repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. That's what you value most. It's all I have that's truly mine, Helen said simply. No one can take it unless I give it away. Something shifted in Taeyong's face, respect, recognition, something deeper. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower. I hide what I am because the moment people know, they change. They want favors, access, power by association. They stop being real. His eyes held hers with unsettling intensity. But you didn't even try to research me before tonight, did you? Helen shrugged. My friend said you were successful and private. That was enough. I don't need to know your net worth or your connections. If we can't have a real conversation, none of that matters anyway. Taeyong smiled then, genuinely smiled, and it transformed his face from austere to almost warm. You have no idea how rare you are. Or maybe you're surrounded by the wrong people, Helen countered. Perhaps, he admitted, but I'm not anymore. The statement hung between them, weighted with implication. Helen felt something shift in her chest. Not quite fear, but awareness. This man was more than he appeared. Carried shadows she couldn't yet see. But in this moment, over cooling tea and half-finished bulgogi, she saw something she recognized. Someone exhausted by pretense, hungry for authenticity, willing to risk vulnerability for connection. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. If you're still here, this story has already pulled you in. Make sure you're subscribed, because the deeper it gets, the harder it is to look away. The rooftop terrace overlooked Seoul, like a private viewing gallery of light and movement. Helen had never been anywhere like it. Secluded, impossibly elegant, accessible only by a private elevator that required a key card Taeyong produced without explanation. The city sprawled beneath them in glittering constellations, and soft jazz drifted from hidden speakers, wrapping around them like silk. This is your idea of a second date? Helen asked, taking in the panoramic view. You're setting the bar pretty high. I wanted somewhere we could actually talk, Taeyong said, guiding her to a table near the edge where the wind carried the scent of night-blooming flowers. Restaurants have too many ears. The comment struck her as odd, but before she could question it, he was pulling out her chair with old-world courtesy that felt genuine rather than performative. They settled into conversation easily, the rhythm from their first date returning. Taeyong revealed pieces of himself in careful increments. His love for Chet Baker and Miles Davis, music that required stillness and attention, how he'd spend entire evenings alone with jazz and silence, needing the quiet to think. My family doesn't understand it, he said, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. They think silence is weakness. That power requires constant noise, constant presence. Strained relationship? Helen ventured gently, recognizing the tension in his voice. An understatement. He stared out at the city, jaw set. They have expectations. A path they've laid out. I've followed it, but... He paused, seeming to weigh his words. The cost is higher than they'll ever acknowledge. Helen wanted to press, to understand the shadows that crossed his face, but something in his posture warned her to wait. Instead, she reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. We don't have to talk about them. His eyes found hers, grateful and surprised. Thank you. The moment shattered as a man emerged from the elevator, young, well-dressed, moving with urgent purpose. He approached their table quickly, head slightly bowed, and spoke in rapid Korean. Helen caught the formal speech patterns, the deferential posture, the way he kept his eyes lowered. Tae-yong's entire demeanor transformed. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by something arctic and absolute. He didn't speak, just looked at the man with an expression so cold, so utterly commanding, that Helen felt the temperature drop. The man stopped mid-sentence, paled visibly, and bowed deeper. "Joseongamida, Hayoungnim," he stammered, backing away like he'd been physically struck. He retreated to the elevator without another word. The silence that followed felt heavy, dangerous. Tae-yong's hand tightened briefly on his glass before he deliberately relaxed, the mask of composure sliding back into place. But Helen had seen beneath it, seen something that made her pulse quicken with instinctive alarm. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, voice perfectly controlled again. "That was business. It shouldn't have happened here." "That man was terrified of you," Helen said quietly, her social worker instincts unable to ignore what she'd witnessed. Not just respectful, actually afraid. Tae-yong met her eyes, and for a moment she saw a calculation there, weighing what to reveal, what to conceal. "I have significant influence in certain circles," he said carefully. "People sometimes forget boundaries." It wasn't an answer. It was a deflection wrapped in silk, and they both knew it. Helen sat back, studying him with new awareness. This wasn't just wealth or business success. This was power of a different magnitude entirely, the kind that made grown men bow and flee. "What exactly do you do, Tae-yong?" she asked. "I manage complex logistics," he replied smoothly. "International networks." "It's complicated." Another non-answer. Helen felt the ground shifting beneath her, instinct warning her that she was standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. But when Tae-yong reached for her hand, his touch was warm and his eyes held genuine vulnerability. "Can we have tonight?" he asked softly. "Before the complications?" Against every rational impulse, Helen nodded. But as the jazz played on and the city glittered below, she couldn't shake the image of that man's fear, or the ice in Tae-yong's eyes when he'd silenced him without a word. Go on and hit subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be felt from beginning to end. The gala was held in a heritage hotel that dripped with old money and older secrets. Helen had borrowed a simple black dress from a friend. Feeling underdressed the moment she stepped into the marble lobby where women wore designer gowns and men moved in clusters that radiated influence. Tae-yong appeared at her side instantly, impeccable in a tailored tuxedo, his hand settling protectively at the small of her back. "You look perfect," he murmured, though she caught how his eyes scanned the room with predatory awareness. As they entered the ballroom, Helen felt the shift immediately. Conversations paused. Heads turned. People tracked Tae-yong's movement with mixture of respect and something darker, wariness, perhaps fear. Men approached to greet him with elaborate courtesy, their smiles tight and calculated. "This is Helen," Tae-yong said to each person, his tone casual but firm. Just Helen. Not his girlfriend. Not a date. Just Helen. The phrase felt like both protection and distance, as if he was deliberately keeping her undefined and therefore safe from whatever dynamics operated in this room. Then June appeared. He was shorter than Tae-yong, but carried himself like a weapon. Compact, precise, radiating controlled violence. His suit was expensive, his face expressionless except for his eyes, which tracked Helen with cold, analytical hostility. "Hayoungnim," June said, bowing slightly to Tae-yong before his gaze sliced back to Helen. "This is unexpected." June, this is Helen Wallace, Taeyong said, his voice carrying a warning edge. Helen, this is June. He handles operations. Helen extended her hand. June looked at it for a beat too long before accepting it briefly, his grip firm and impersonal. Ms. Wallace, I hope you're enjoying the evening. The words were polite. The tone was arctic. It's certainly eye-opening, Helen replied evenly, refusing to flinch under his scrutiny. June's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, more acknowledgement of challenge. He leaned closer to Taeyong and spoke in rapid Korean, his voice low and urgent. Helen caught the tone, if not the words. Disapproval, concern, barely contained frustration. Taeyong responded quietly, his expression hardening. Whatever he said made June's jaw tighten, but the lieutenant stepped back and bowed curtly. As you wish, Hyungnim. He cast one more measuring look at Helen before disappearing into the crowd. He doesn't like me, Helen observed. He doesn't trust easily, Taeyong said, and he thinks you're a complication I don't need. Am I? Taeyong's hand found hers, fingers interlacing. You're the only thing in my life that isn't a complication. Later, in a quiet alcove away from the crowd, Taeyong finally offered something resembling truth. My family controls a vast logistics network, he said carefully, watching her face. International. Secretive. It's why I'm guarded, why men like June exist, why people treat me the way they do. Logistics, Helen repeated, tasting the euphemism. That's a very careful word. It has to be. His eyes held hers, intense and searching. There are things I can't tell you. Things that would put you at risk just by knowing. But I need you to understand. This is my life. This is what I am. Helen felt her chest tighten. Every instinct screamed that logistics network was a lie wrapped in silk, that the fear she'd seen, the deference, the men like June who moved like soldiers, it all pointed to something far darker than import-export businesses. I understand, she said slowly, though she didn't. Not really. But as Taeyong pulled her close, his relief palpable, Helen felt the ground shifting again beneath her feet. She was in deeper now, surrounded by beautiful people with dangerous eyes, and the man holding her hand commanded them all with a word, a look, a terrifying stillness that promised consequences she couldn't yet imagine. The unease settled into her bones like winter cold. If this moment has your heart racing even a little, subscribe now. Things are about to escalate. The call came on a Thursday morning while Helen was reviewing case files. Her supervisor's voice was tight with concern. Min June Park didn't show for his court date. His wife says he disappeared 3 days ago. Helen's blood went cold. Min June was her client. A husband trying to navigate a messy domestic dispute, caught between his traditional family's expectations and his wife's allegations of emotional abuse. She'd been working with him for months, building trust, creating a safety plan. He wouldn't just vanish, unless someone made him. She spent the day calling contacts, checking hospitals, filing missing person reports. By evening, she'd uncovered something that made her hands shake. Min June's brother-in-law worked for a logistics company with ties to Korean organized networks, the same circles that orbited Taeyong like satellites around a dark sun. Helen drove to Taeyong's penthouse without calling first. The doorman recognized her and waved her through, but she barely registered the luxury surrounding her as she rode the elevator up. When Taeyong opened the door, surprise and pleasure crossing his face, she pushed past him into the apartment. Helen, what? Min June Park, she said, spinning to face him. Do you know that name? Something flickered in Taeyong's eyes. Recognition, calculation. I don't discuss. He's my client. He's missing. Her voice shook with barely controlled fury. His family has connections to your world. Taeyong, your network. So I need you to tell me right now, is your work related to his disappearance? Taeyong's expression hardened into something unreadable. No. That's it? Just no. I am not involved in whatever happened to your client, he said, each word precisely measured. But his eyes betrayed something else, a deep, controlled urgency that made her stomach drop. He knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. You're lying, Helen said quietly. Or you're not telling me the whole truth, which is the same thing. Tae-yong moved closer, his hands rising as if to touch her before dropping. There are things I cannot tell you. Not because I don't want to, but because knowing puts you in danger. A man is missing. Helen's voice cracked. A father. Someone I promised to help. And you're talking about protecting me? Yes, Tae-yong said fiercely. Always. Even for myself. The admission hung between them like a confession. Helen felt something break inside her chest. The fragile belief that she could separate Tae-yong from his world, that his power existed in some abstract realm that wouldn't touch her real life. This is who you are, she said, the realization bitter on her tongue. This is what your logistics network does. People disappear. Families are destroyed. And you stand there in your expensive suit and tell me you're protecting me? I would never hurt you, Tae-yong said, and there was raw emotion in his voice now, breaking through his control. Never. Whatever you think of me, whatever I am, that is the one thing I can promise. But you can't promise that your world won't hurt the people I care about, Helen countered. Can you? The silence was answer enough. Tae-yong's jaw tightened, and she saw something dangerous flash across his face. Not directed at her, but inward at himself. I will find out what happened to your client, he said finally. If my network had anything to do with his disappearance, I will discover it and I will fix it. And if they did, Helen demanded. What then? Do you make another person disappear to cover it up? No, Tae-yong said, and his voice carried absolute conviction. I make it right. However, I have to. Helen wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But as she stood in his pristine penthouse, overlooking a city full of secrets, she felt the moral ground beneath her feet crumbling, leaving her suspended between the man she was falling for and the darkness he represented. Before we turn the page, subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stay for what comes next. Helen noticed a black sedan 3 blocks from her office, then again at the coffee shop where she stopped for her evening caffeine fix. By the time she reached the parking garage near her apartment, her social worker instincts, honed by years of domestic violence cases and threat assessments, were screaming. She walked faster, keys already positioned between her fingers. The footsteps behind her were deliberate, unhurried. When she reached her car, a voice stopped her cold. Ms. Wallace. June stood 5 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, expression blank as winter stone. He'd somehow circled ahead of her, cutting off her path. Following women in parking garages, Helen said, forcing her voice steady despite her racing heart. That's a good look for you. I need you to understand something, June said, moving closer with predator grace. Tae-yong is distracted, vulnerable, and in our world, vulnerability gets people killed. So this is about protecting him? This is about protecting what matters. June's eyes were flat, emotionless. You're digging into things you don't understand. Asking questions that draw attention. You need to stop. Helen straightened, channeling every ounce of authority she'd ever used with aggressive clients. Or what? You'll make me disappear like Min-jun Park. Something flickered in June's face. Surprise, perhaps respect. I'm giving you a courtesy because Hyungnim cares about you. Walk away. Go back to your safe life. Forget what you think you know. I don't abandon people, Helen said fiercely. Not my clients and not Tae-yong. So if you want me gone, you're going to have to do more than lurk in parking garages and make vague threats. June studied her for a long moment, and Helen saw the calculation behind his eyes, weigh her value against the risk she posed. Finally, he stepped back. You're brave or stupid. I haven't decided which. Both, probably, Helen said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. June almost smiled. Almost. He's going to get hurt because of you. Remember that when it happens. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows with unsettling efficiency. Helen waited until her hands stopped shaking before calling Tae-yong. 20 minutes later, she sat in Tae-yong's office while Ray's voices carried through the closed door. She couldn't understand the Korean, but the tone was unmistakable. Tae-yong's fury meeting June's defensive justifications in a clash that felt seismic. When the door opened, June emerged first, his face carefully neutral except for a tightness around his eyes. He paused, looking at Helen with something that might have been grudging acknowledgement. Before leaving without a word, Tae-yong appeared in the doorway, rage still simmering beneath his composed surface. "Did he hurt you?" "No," Helen said. "Just tried to scare me off." Tae-yong crossed to her, hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. "I will not let anyone in my organization threaten you. Not June. Not anyone." "He's worried about you," Helen said quietly. "He thinks I'm making you vulnerable." "He's right," Tae-yong admitted, and the rawness in his voice made her chest ache. "You are my weakness. But you're also the only thing that makes this life bearable." Helen leaned into his touch, but she'd seen June's face, seen the fracture in the absolute loyalty Tae-yong commanded. By choosing her, he was creating rifts in the foundation of his power. And in a world built on fear and control, cracks could be fatal. "This is getting dangerous," she whispered. "I know." Tae-yong's thumb traced her cheekbone. "But I'm not letting you go." The promise should have comforted her. Instead, it felt like a vow that would cost them both more than either could afford. Take a breath and hit subscribe, because this story is only now revealing its true shape. The apartment was obscene in its luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, Italian marble floors, furniture that probably cost more than Helen's annual salary. But it was the armed men stationed at every entrance, the reinforced steel door, and the panic room hidden behind a bookshelf that made her stomach turn. "This is temporary," Tae-yong said, watching her take in the gilded cage he'd built, "until things settle." "Things," Helen repeated flatly. "You mean until whoever you've angered decides I'm not worth killing?" His jaw tightened. "There's been chatter. Rival factions testing boundaries. You're visible now, connected to me. That makes you a target." Helen walked to the window, looking down at the city that suddenly felt hostile and full of watching eyes. Two men in dark suits stood on the balcony below. More security, more guns. How many people are guarding this place? "Enough," Tae-yong said. 12-hour shifts, rotation every 6 hours. Background check, personally vetted. You're talking about human beings like they're security equipment. I'm talking about keeping you alive." His voice held an edge she'd never heard before, not anger, but something rawer. "Fear, maybe. This is my life, Helen. This is what I've tried to shield you from. Constant calculation, constant threat. I can't turn it off just because I want to." Helen turned to face him, and the vulnerability in his expression broke something in her. He looked exhausted, carrying weight she couldn't fully comprehend. "Then why bring me into it?" she asked quietly. "Why not let me go?" Tae-yong crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her close with desperate intensity. "Because I need you," he said against her hair. "Because in 20 years of this life, you're the first real thing I found. The first person who sees me, not what I can give them or what they can take from me." Helen closed her eyes, feeling the solid warmth of him, the racing of his heart against hers. She'd walked into this willingly, drawn by his authenticity, his hunger for connection. But standing in this beautiful prison with armed men outside and bulletproof glass between her and the world, she understood the true cost. "I was safe before you," she whispered. "My life was small, maybe, but it was mine. I helped people. I made a difference." "You still can," Tae-yong insisted. "I won't let this destroy who you are." But it already had, hadn't it? Helen looked around the apartment again. The silk curtains, the priceless art, the hidden cameras she'd spotted in 3 rooms. Every luxury was a reminder that she'd traded her ethical, independent life for proximity to power. She was surrounded by opulence and violence in equal measure, protected by the same men who probably enforced Tae-yong's will with brutal efficiency. "This is a cage," she said, the realization settling over her like cement. "A beautiful, expensive cage." "It's safety," Tae-yong countered, but even he couldn't make it sound convincing. Helen pulled away, needing distance to think. She walked to the panic room, studying the biometric lock, the reinforced walls. Everything about this place screamed danger, paranoia, a life lived in constant fear of retaliation. "How long?" she asked. "How long do I have to live like this?" Taeyong's expression was answer enough. In his world, there was no until things settle. There was only permanent vigilance, eternal threat, power maintained through fear and overwhelming force. Helen sank onto the designer couch, and for the first time since meeting Taeyong, she let herself cry, not from fear but from grief. Grief for the life she'd had, the person she'd been, the simple freedom of walking to her car without armed escorts. If you're feeling this tension too, tap that subscribe button. The storm that's coming, you don't want to miss it. Helen had insisted on leaving the safe house, just for an hour, just to feel normal again. Taeyong had reluctantly agreed, arranging a car to take them to a quiet gallery opening. Something cultural, civilian, safe. Or so they thought. They were walking from the car to the gallery entrance when Helen noticed Taeyong's security detail stiffen. It happened so fast she almost missed it. A man emerging from between parked cars, hand reaching inside his jacket. Before Helen could process what she was seeing, Taeyong's hand clamped around her arm and yanked her behind him. The world exploded into controlled chaos. Two security guards materialized like ghosts, moving with terrifying precision. One intercepted the attacker with a strike so swift Helen barely saw it. Just a sickening crack of impact and the man crumpling. The second guard swept the perimeter, hand on his concealed weapon, while a third appeared from nowhere to shield Taeyong and Helen with his body. It was over in seconds. Silent, efficient, deadly. Helen stood frozen, heart hammering, watching as the guards hauled the unconscious attacker toward a black van that pulled up with preternatural timing. No police sirens, no witnesses scrambling away, just a smooth, practiced machinery of violence containing itself. Taeyong turned to her, his face a mask of cold composure that chilled her more than the attack itself. "Are you hurt?" Helen couldn't speak. She shook her head mutely. "Get her inside," Taeyong said to the nearest guard, his voice utterly calm, as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Then he walked toward the van where they'd taken the attacker, his stride unhurried, almost casual. Helen found her voice. "Taeyong, wait." He paused, looked back at her. In his eyes she saw something that made her blood run cold. Not fear, not anger, but a flat, pragmatic assessment of a problem that needed solving. This was the real Taeyong. Not the vulnerable man who confessed his loneliness over tea, but the one who commanded an empire built on violence. "I'll handle this," he said simply. "Go inside. I'll be 5 minutes." 5 minutes. As if he was running an errand, not deal with a man who just tried to kill him. Helen let herself be guided into the gallery, but she watched through the glass doors as Taeyong approached the van. He spoke briefly to June, who'd appeared like a phantom, then leaned into the van where the attacker was being held. Helen couldn't see what happened next, but she saw June satisfied nod, saw the van drive away, saw Taeyong straighten his jacket and check his watch with the same nonchalance someone might show after a business meeting. When he returned, he was smiling, that charming, warm smile that had first drawn her in. "I'm sorry about that. Shall we see the exhibit?" Helen stared at him, genuinely unable to comprehend the disconnect. "You're acting like nothing happened." "Because nothing did happen," Taeyong said, his tone matter-of-fact. "The threat was neutralized. We're safe. That's how this works." "What happens to that man?" Helen asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Taeyong's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went hard. "He'll be questioned, then dealt with appropriately." Dealt with. Such a careful, sterile phrase for whatever horror awaited someone who'd threatened a Korean Mafia boss. Helen thought of the missing persons cases she'd worked, the bodies that sometimes turn up in a river, the families left with nothing but questions and grief. "You're not even shaken," she whispered. "This is just routine for you." "Yes," Taeyong said, and the honesty in his admission was somehow worse than a lie. "This is who I am, Helen. This is what I've been trying to tell you." Helen looked at the man she'd fallen for, impeccably dressed, devastatingly handsome, standing in the gallery entrance like any other wealthy patron. But now she saw the truth beneath the surface, the cold efficiency, the casual violence, the absolute authority over life and death. She was in love with a monster. If you follow their journey this far, subscribe. It's the best way to stay with them until the final moment. Helen didn't sleep that night. She lay in the safe house bedroom, staring at the ceiling while armed men patrolled outside her door and replayed the scene in an endless loop. The casual efficiency of violence, Tae-yong's unshaken composure, the van driving away with a man who would be dealt with appropriately. By dawn, she knew what she had to do. She found Tae-yong in his study, reviewing documents with a focused intensity she'd once found attractive. Now it just looked like what it was: a predator managing his territory. "I need to leave," Helen said from the doorway. Tae-yong looked up, and something in her voice made him set down his papers immediately. "Helen, I can't do this." The words came out strangled, raw. "I can't be here in this life watching you." Her voice broke. "I love you. God help me. I love you so much it's destroying me. But I cannot compromise my soul for you." Tae-yong stood, crossing to her with desperate urgency. "What happened yesterday was necessary. That man was sent to kill me. To kill us." "I know," Helen said, and tears were streaming down her face now. "And that's what terrifies me. That in your world, violence is necessary. That people disappear and die, and it's just business. I've spent my entire career helping people escape cycles of violence, and now I'm living with someone who perpetuates it. I protect what's mine," Tae-yong said fiercely, "including you, especially you. By becoming complicit in murder?" Helen's voice rose. "By standing next to you while you order people dealt with?" "I can't, Tae-yong. I won't. Every day I stay here, I lose more of who I am. The person who believed in justice, in ethics, in right and wrong that doesn't bend because I'm in love. So what are you saying?" Tae-yong's voice was quiet now, deadly calm masking devastation. "I'm saying I need space. I need to leave." Helen forced herself to meet his eyes. "I need to find myself again, away from all this. Away from you." The words landed like bullets. Tae-yong's composure cracked, just for a moment, revealing raw anguish beneath. "If you leave, I can't protect you." "Maybe I don't want protection that comes at this price," Helen whispered. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they couldn't say. Finally, Tae-yong nodded once, a sharp, painful movement. "I won't keep you prisoner. If you want to go, I'll arrange safe transport to wherever you need." "Just like that?" "No," Tae-yong said, and his voice was wrecked. "Not just like that. But I respect you too much to cage you, even if losing you destroys me." Helen saw the truth in his face. He was already fracturing. June's warnings echoed in her mind. Distracted, vulnerable, at risk from his own people. By loving her, he created a weakness in his armor. By leaving, she might be signing his death warrant. But staying would sign hers, not physical death, but the death of everything she'd built her life on. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it with her entire shattered heart. Tae-yong reached out, cupped her face one last time with heartbreaking gentleness. "Don't be sorry for having integrity. It's why I fell for you." He pressed his forehead to hers briefly. "Go save yourself, Helen, even if I can't be saved." Then he stepped back, became the Mafia boss again, composed, controlled, impenetrable. "June will take you wherever you want to go. You'll have protection for 2 weeks, then you're free." Helen nodded, unable to speak past the grief choking her. She turned to leave, and with every step away from him, she felt something essential tearing inside her chest. At the door, she looked back once. Tae-yong stood in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his violent empire, looking more alone than any person she'd ever seen. Then she walked out, leaving her heart behind in a world too dark for her to survive. Before we step into the final chapter, subscribe now. Some stories stay with you, and this is one of them. 3 weeks passed in a fog of grief and resuming her old life. Helen returned to her apartment, her social work cases, her routine. But nothing felt the same. She moved through her days mechanically, helping clients while her own heart remained a hollow wound. Then the envelope arrived. Inside was a single card with an address and time, written in Tae-yong's precise handwriting. No explanation, just a request. "Please come." Helen stood outside a renovated building in one of Seoul's most neglected neighborhoods. The sign above the entrance read, New Horizons Youth Center in Korean and English. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the door. The interior was stunning, bright, welcoming, equipped with everything an after-school program could dream of: computers, art supplies, a full kitchen, counseling rooms. And standing in the main hall, looking exhausted and uncertain in a way she'd never seen him, was Tae-yong. "What is this?" Helen asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Your center," Tae-yong said, "fully funded. Endowment established. You're listed as a director, if you'll accept." He moved closer, careful not to crowd her. "I've spent 3 weeks restructuring my operations. The most ethically volatile parts, the ones that kept me awake at night, they're gone. Delegated, sold off, eliminated." "Tae-yong, I can't quit my life," he continued, urgency bleeding through his control. "I won't lie and say I'm leaving the organization. I'm still who I am, still connected to that world. But I've made it as clean as it can be, and I've dedicated my resources to this." He gestured around them. "To protecting what you represent, the good you want to do in this world." Helen felt tears burning her eyes. "Why?" "Because losing you taught me something," Tae-yong said, and his voice cracked. "I built an empire on fear and control, but the only thing that ever made me feel human was you. Your integrity, your refusal to compromise your soul." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched in his face, the weight he'd carried alone. "You were right to leave. But I'm asking you to come back, not to my world, but to build something between us. A space where your values matter more than my convenience." Helen looked around the center, at the resources, the thoughtfulness, the massive risk he'd taken to make this real. This wasn't a grand romantic gesture meant to buy her back. This was him fundamentally reshaping his empire to create room for her ethics. "You're still dangerous," she said quietly, "still connected to violence." "Yes," Tae-yong admitted. "I can't change that completely, but I can contain it, channel it, use my power to protect people like the ones you serve, instead of just protecting my interests." He held out his hand. "I'm asking for something unconventional. A partnership where we bridge our worlds without destroying yours." Helen studied his face, the vulnerability, the determination, the fierce loyalty that had drawn her to him from the beginning. He hadn't asked her to compromise. He'd compromised himself, risked his position, restructured his entire operation to honor what she held sacred. She took his hand. "Fierce, unconventional loyalty," she said. "That's what you're offering?" "That's what I'm promising," Tae-yong replied. "You keep your integrity. I keep you safe. We build something powerful together." Helen pulled him close, and when their lips met, it felt like sealing a vow, dangerous, unconventional, but utterly real. She was choosing to love a man who lived in shadows, but he was choosing to let light in, not redemption, but transformation, not escape from his world, but a boundary within it that protected what mattered most. "I'm the director, then," Helen said against his mouth. "You're everything," Tae-yong whispered back. Outside, Seoul glittered with possibility and danger in equal measure. But here, in this center built on compromise and fierce devotion, they'd found something neither could have created alone: a life that honored both power and principle, darkness and light, bound together by a love that refused to be simple or safe, only real. If this story touched you, surprised you, or kept you holding your breath, hit subscribe. Your support writes the next chapter. The end.